All right, welcome to another Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something I think a lot of our listeners are going to find helpful. We're going to be talking about how to confidently talk about your daily routine in English.
That's a great topic. It's so fundamental.
Yeah, and we're looking at an episode of an English learning podcast. I thought it was a really great source because it uses pretty clear and simple language, which is perfect, if you're still learning English.
Absolutely.
It really breaks things down. And it's amazing how being able to talk about your day can really help you connect with people and build fluency.
It really is. I mean, so much of daily conversation revolves around, what we do each day.
Exactly. And the podcast really emphasizes those basic verbs, right? Like wake up, get up, take a shower, get dressed. Rather than just listing them out, I thought maybe we could group them a bit thematically. It might help people remember them.
Sure.
So first we have those morning routine verbs: wake up, get up, take a shower, get dressed. And it's funny how even simple verbs like get up can be a little tricky for English learners.
Oh, absolutely. For a native speaker, it's totally intuitive. But for someone learning the language, it can be helpful to really understand the subtle difference between wake up, which is when your eyes open, and get up, when you actually leave the bed.
Right, like I'm awake right now, but I haven't gotten up yet.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we have breakfast, which is a classic morning activity in many cultures.
Yeah.
Then, as the day progresses, we move into those verbs related to work or school. So we have go to work, school, start work, studying, have lunch, finish work.
I think these verbs are pretty straightforward. But it's important to pay attention to those little prepositions to and at that go with them. Those little words can make a big difference.
That's a good point. And you can really see how these simple verbs really form the backbone of describing your day. And the podcast even gave a sample routine from their host, Alex. He talked about what a typical day looks like for him.
Yeah. And what's key there is that he used the simple present tense. This is like the go-to tense for talking about routines and habits. You'll hear it all the time. I wake up at 7. I take the bus to work. I study in the evenings.
Yeah, it's like a little grammar code that signals this is what I do regularly.
Exactly.
It sounds a lot more natural than saying yesterday I woke up at 7, every time you talk about your routine.
Precisely. And speaking of sounding natural, the podcast also highlighted some really great questions that you can use to ask someone about their routine.
Oh yeah, they did. I like that.
They get some nice examples like, what time do you usually wake up? Or,
wow,
what do you do first thing in the morning?
I love that question. What do you do first thing in the morning?
It goes beyond the basic, wake up. And it gives someone a chance to share something unique or special about their routine. Like maybe they meditate or they go for a run or make a special cup of coffee. Exactly. Those types of questions really invite the other person to share some personal details, which is so important for building that connection and rapport, showing you're genuinely interested.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got these building blocks. We've got those key verbs, the simple present tense, and some great conversation starters. What else did the podcast suggest for improving our ability to talk about our routine?
Well, they actually took it a step further, and they touched on the cultural aspect of describing routines.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They had this segment where they talked about how descriptions of daily routines can actually vary across cultures.
Oh, wow. I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
It seems like such a basic thing how you describe your day.
Yeah, but even in something as simple as a morning routine, you can see cultural differences reflected in the language that people use.
Like what?
Well, for example, in some cultures, it's really common to mention family interactions right away. Like you might hear someone say, I help my mother prepare breakfast, or I wake up the children. It kind of highlights the importance of family in their daily lives.
That makes sense. In other cultures, the focus might be more on like individual actions or efficiency. I grab a quick coffee, I check my emails on the train.
Exactly. It reflects a faster-paced, more individualistic lifestyle.
It's fascinating how these little differences in language can reveal
Yeah.
deeper cultural values.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that learning a language isn't just about grammar and vocabulary. It's about understanding a culture's way of thinking and perceiving the world.
It's like languages is a window into a culture's soul. So we've talked about the importance of mastering those basic verbs, the simple present tense, those good conversation starter questions. And now this cultural layer. It seems like a lot to keep in mind when you're just trying to talk about your day.
It might seem that way, but the beauty of language learning is that it happens gradually. You don't have to master everything at once. The podcast even had some practical advice for how to get more comfortable talking about your routine.
Oh, right. They suggested practicing out loud and even recording yourself, I have to admit. The thought of recording myself speaking English makes me cringe a little.
I understand that feeling. But it's honestly such a valuable tool. It allows you to hear yourself objectively and pinpoint any areas where you might be stumbling or where your pronunciation could use a little fine-tuning.
So it's like having your own personal language coach, but without the cost.
Exactly. The podcast host mentioned that even they, as experienced English speakers, they still record themselves sometimes to catch little errors or areas for improvement.
Wow, that's dedication. And it's not just about identifying errors. It's about developing that fluency and confidence. The more you practice speaking, the more natural it will become.
Like training a muscle, the more you use it, the stronger it gets.
But all this talk about language and culture has got me wondering. All this talk about language and culture has got me thinking, like, if the way we talk about our routines can actually change how we experience them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like if I start incorporating more family-oriented phrases into my English routine descriptions, would I feel more connected to my family throughout the day?
You're touching on the idea of linguistic relativity, the concept that the language we speak can actually shape our thoughts and perceptions.
It's a bit of a mind-bending idea.
It is.
So you're saying that by changing the way I talk about my day, I might actually start experiencing my day differently.
It's definitely a possibility. There's research that suggests that learning a new language and its unique way of expressing things can influence our understanding of time relationships, even our own sense of self. It's like seeing the world through a new lens.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. It makes language learning even more enriching, knowing it has the potential to change not only how we communicate, but how we think and feel.
I think so too. But even without going down that philosophical rabbit hole, I think this deep dive has highlighted some really valuable takeaways for anyone learning English.
For sure. Just having those basic verbs and phrases for describing your day can make you feel so much more confident when speaking English.
Exactly. And remembering that simple present tense, it's a small detail, but it really makes a difference. And those conversation starter questions, don't underestimate their power to open up deeper, more meaningful conversations.
It's all about moving beyond that surface level and really connecting with others.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, what's the key message we want to leave our listeners with?
I think this language learning is so much more than just memorizing words and grammar rules. It's about gaining insight into different cultures, expanding your worldview, and maybe even, as we've discussed, reshaping your own experience of the world.
Well said. And to anyone out there who's learning English, remember that even mastering something as seemingly simple as describing your daily routine can be a huge step forward in your language journey.
Absolutely. It's a foundation upon which so many other conversations can be built. So keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep those conversations flowing.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Till next time, keep learning and keep discovering.